Hi guys, this is Angela and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be drawing a Japanese animated film called Wolf Children, directed by Mamoru Hosoda. Being one of the most sought-after anime directors in Japan, Hosoda has a very distinct artistic and story style that sets him apart from Studio Ghibli. The story of Wolf Children, as you might be able to guess from the title, follows a single mom and her half-wolf children, Ame and Yuki. They move to the countryside to lead a quiet life away from discrimination and cruelty from society. With beautifully painted backgrounds and captivating storytelling, we are taken through the ups and downs of this special family. We witness the strength and unconditional love of a mother, and we watch Ame and Yuki grow up with very different temperament and coming to terms with their identities in their own unique ways. In terms of art direction and background painting, it seems to have been created with an art medium close to gouache, with some qualities resembling watercolor. Varying level of transparency and thin, detailed brush strokes make the environments feel very gentle and welcoming. Location and set design does remind me of My Neighbor Totoro, but it almost feels like they are intentionally paying tribute. Although fairly realistic in design and with well-rendered details, the color palette remains bright, saturated, and child-friendly. Both from the storytelling and artistic perspective, I will highly recommend this film. Today I'll be drawing 3 compositions from it with acrylic markers. I'm drawing the line work with an HB pencil on the 14-point coated cardstock paper. The first composition definitely reminds me of a shot from My Neighbor Totoro. I'm using an extra fine tip light blue marker to trace the outline of the composition. And then I'm going in with the medium white marker to trace out the border of the white cloud to cover up the pencil work, as well as giving it a transition from the white of the paper to the sky color. So I'm simply tracing out and filling in the sky with light blue. It's much easier to use a medium tip marker for big areas like this. Once the sky is filled in, I'm going to draw in some of the shadow on the cloud. It's a very light blue color that isn't available in an existing marker, so I took out my little sketch pad and I'm just mixing light blue and white on the sketch pad before bringing that color over onto my drawing. This is a quick and easy way to pre-mix color for smaller areas that needs a unique shade. After the sky and clouds are done, I'm moving on to distant mountains. I usually work in layers, so for a shot where the sky is predominant, I usually start with the sky and then paint layer by layer starting from the most distant layer. As you can see, distant layers are lighter in color, and as objects are closer to camera, they will appear darker. To separate the layers, it also helps to make the edge or area where 2 layers touching darker. So you can see that I'm leaving the character space empty. I'll be doing the character last. The foreground is very straightforward. We have a few layers of grass. So I'm using a warm green as well as blending in some green. And as seen in the reference, there are some white specks on the right side grass, which I'm assuming are just the highlight of grass. And on the left side, there are some highlights to indicate flower as well as grass blades. Although there are similarities in the art direction, but the painting style is definitely different from a Ghibli painting, especially in the way it treats detail like grass blades. With Ghibli paintings, it tends to be more suggestive. You don't see the individual blades, but with Wolf Children, I see that in their backgrounds, they do have individual blades of grass painted. So I skipped over the bit where I painted in the character because my head was so close to the paper it blocked it. Moving on to the second painting is a very typical sunset painting with the glowing sun blasting out sunlight lighting up clouds that's covering it as well as foreground elements. The sun is pretty low at this point. There's a lot of red in the sky as well as in the clouds. In terms of my steps and techniques for this composition, it's a little bit all over the place, to be honest. For a sunset shot with so many overlapping clouds, rim lights and glows everywhere, it's very hard to paint one solid shape and just move on. I have to use quite a bit of color to depict the glow that's coming through. So if you don't mind me, I'm just going to not explain what happened there because I don't even know. For the foreground, it's a lot more clear as to what I'm doing. I'm first laying down the highlight on the foreground trees. As I've mentioned before, it always helps when you paint the lighter layer first. I'm adding in a transitional area of brown because the highlight is such a warm color. I don't want to go straight into a dark because that will create too high of a contrast. The brown softens the edge and provides a transition from highlight to shadow. After I finished the foreground, I realized the mid-ground purplish area is a bit too light, so I'm darkening it with violet and fuchsia. You can see that my strokes are all in one direction to give it a bit of texture, but also if you go in too many directions, it will look messy. So I'm just finishing up that cloud on the left side and adding in some highlights with white, as well as darkening the edge of the right side pink mid-ground with a bit of brown. Moving on to the third composition, contrary to the sunset of the second drawing, this is a sunrise scene. It's hard to see, but I used ivory, a very light yellow color, for the highlight of the cloud, and for the shadow of the cloud, I used light blue. As for the transitional area between the highlight and shadow, I used beige to soften that edge. Before I finished even more clouds, I decided to put down the sky color. So the top of the sky is a very light blue color, lighter than the shadow of the cloud. So for the top, I had to mix light blue and white on the paper as I was painting. The reason why I'm mixing it directly on the drawing instead of on a separate sketchbook pad is because it's a very big area of one shade. It's easier for me to mix it right on the drawing. This is when you need really thick and smooth paper. So going back to finishing the cloud, same technique, drawing down shadow shape, softening it and adding in a bit of beige. Clouds that are closer to the sun are warmer in color. I'm using a lot of light orange, bright yellow, pastel yellow, and straw yellow. I left the center of the peaking sun white and added some white highlights to the downside of clouds that's being lit up by the sun. So my camera died at this point, and we missed some footage of me starting to work on the foreground mountain. However, it's pretty straightforward. The edge is a lighter blue-greenish color, and the body of the mountain is darker. For the very foreground mountain, in the reference I see a lot of detail of forest on the mountain, so I'm adding in green and using navy blue as shadow. The way I'm creating these strokes is try to indicate and depict the shape of trees without going into too much detail. You want to be aware of the form you are depicting or the objects you are depicting. Utilize the shape of the tip of the marker to help you create that illusion in your drawing. I'm adding in a lot more black on the left side to hint at more detail within the shadow shape. The shadow I used khaki green. Once I finished the foreground mountains, I went back to edit some details here and there to make sure the glow of the rising sun is more obvious. And that's pretty much it for these 3 compositions. I hope you were able to learn something from my process as well as my explanation. If you found the premise of this movie interesting, I will highly recommend you to give it a watch, and if you have time, you could even do some studies from this movie like I did. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.